All right, number 5 in the series of psychological podcasts for Pershore Town, looking at individual differences, and this time are the link between arousal theory and sports performance. So arousal theory is a fairly straightforward concept, best represented by the inverted U theory of arousal. On the y-axis on the left-hand side, we have performance from low to high, and on the x-axis down at the bottom, we have arousal level, psychological arousal. Other words could be stress, anxiety, preparedness for the game, going from low all the way up to high. And in the middle, you see this optimum point, this zone where we want to try to get our performers to in terms of their psychological preparedness and focus on the game. So there's 3 key areas really to explain. The first one is a player who's under-aroused, where their arousal levels are fairly low, they're relaxed, they're not particularly fired up for a game, and at this point their performance level as a result is anywhere between low on the far left-hand side of the graph, moving up towards gradually this optimum point. But in this left-hand side, performance is still a little bit below potential. Their attentional band is quite broad, which means that the number of features of the environment that they're aware of is too high. They're aware of the crowd, they've spotted their girlfriend in the crowd, they're listening to what mum and dad are saying at the side of the pitch rather than listening to you as the coach. They're concentrating on the fella walking past with his dog, thinking, oh, that's a strange dog, and maybe even some music playing in the background out of a car that's just drive past. They're under-aroused, therefore their field of focus is too wide. As a result, there's an overload of information, and because they're paying some attention to that information, the decisions made on the pitch are quite slow and cumbersome and often filled with errors. The opposite side of the scale is where a player becomes over-aroused. They go beyond this optimum point and they get too het up and focused on what they're trying to do. Essentially, they're trying too hard. Psychologically, that's known as hypervigilance. They're over-focusing on very small amounts of information, and most frequently we see that as a player focusing on their own performance, a bad touch, a missed shot, a missed tackle, a goalkeeper letting a goal in, and they become hyper-vigilant and over-focus on that. For younger children who are not emotionally mature, that can often lead to tears or tantrums or walking off the pitch or whatever it might be. For older players, it often results in aggression towards an opponent, and it might be the opponent that they're becoming hyper-vigilant about, especially when they're blocking their performance or their drive to a goal or what they're trying to achieve. The perceptual or the attentional band in this case is far too narrow, and they're only focusing on one specific thing because their arousal's too high, and this of course has a knock-on effect to their decision making, which is often incorrect. Now, this graph shows, the inverted U theory, shows a gradual decline in performance as arousal gets beyond the optimum. There is a slightly different theory called catastrophe theory, where the drop-off is not gradual, it's much more sudden once the performer goes beyond the optimum point of arousal. Best example of this I can think of is Zinedine Zidane when he headbutted Materazzi, or possibly Gascoigne in the cup final, where he was off the pitch with an injury within 10 minutes because he was over-focused on trying to go and win that game and made some terrible decisions. So clearly the point that we're trying to get our players to is the optimum arousal level, where the attentional field is just right. They're taking in and utilising and focusing on just the right amount of information. This has a positive effect on the ability to focus properly and to act on those appropriate cues, putting tackles in at the right time, covering teammates at the right time, making the runs up front at the right time, keeping their width as a wide player, and so on. The capacity to make fast and accurate decisions here because is maximised because they're taking in just the right amount of information, but not too much. So they're not making incorrect decisions because they're trying to concentrate on just one thing, and they're able to make those decisions because they're not trying to concentrate on everything. Their attentional field is just right. So that's where we're trying to get the players to. The difficulty, of course, is all the players are different. So player A, here on the left-hand side, could be your shy and nervous player who perhaps overthinks the game sometimes. They're wizards in training, and every time in training where the atmosphere is very relaxed, they tend to perform at their best. But come match day, when the pressure's on and the arousal level increases, they go beyond their optimum level. One strategy to combat this is you put player A under match day pressure in training scenarios, and you make training scenarios shorter and snappy, and really try and get players to perform with the intensity of a match day. And good ways to do that is to match up teams evenly and really put pressure on the performance level in a training scenario. On the opposite end of the scale to player A, we have player C. Player C is often not that good in training, and in match day scenarios where we're playing against lesser opposition, where a win is in their home mind sort of guaranteed, and therefore they don't perform, they become lethargic at low arousal levels, perhaps a little bit complacent, and as a result some surprise results occur. Player C, as you can see by the graph, they like a fairly high level of arousal. They like to be motivated and under pressure. They tend to be what's known as type B personalities. They're pretty relaxed. They are not too aggressive. They don't mind the pressure of the performance, and in big games they manage to keep a steady head, and even in big situations like penalty taking, they're quite happy to step up to the plate and put themselves in the spotlight because they like that extra pressure. Player B, they like an arousal level somewhere here, right in the middle, and they're the mean between the two extremes of player A and player B. Problem is, of course, as you can see, what might be where the arrow is, a great level of arousal for player B, somewhere in the middle. Player A at this point has shot his bolt. He's way over the top. He's kicking out and screaming and crying and wanting to come off the pitch and complaining. And player C at this point is barely awake. So the challenges for a coach are how to combat that and try and get each player individually close to their optimum arousal level. Pre-match team talks are important to set out the strategy of play. But what's also important, and where you might utilise your coaching team, is to spot those individual players who need an arm around the shoulder and a little bit of self-confidence boosting, talking to them about what they're doing well so that they feel more relaxed going into the game. And player C might need to be taken aside and given a bit of a rocket and told that his performance just needs to step up to that next level and not to be complacent and to draw attention to that. And then, of course, one strategy that a coach can use is to, just with his list of players, try to identify, just with three categories, player A, player B, player C, how they feel that this player copes with stressful situations and where they are at their optimum, and then measure that against performance. So it's worth trying out in training, putting a player under a little bit of pressure and seeing how they cope with that. Do they rise to that challenge as player C might, or do they crumble like player A might? And if they crumble, okay, well, we'll take the pressure off that player and then again measure it by how they perform in training and in match days, and gradually build up this profile of the players and then employ the strategies to either raise or lower their arousal level to try to get them at their optimum on match days.